Hello everybody and welcome to, this is the first episode of Painting Black Sun. Hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on some more of these because they're really nifty. Obviously it's a 75mm figure and we're going to use some oils on it. Now here's the base that she comes with. Obviously Dragon Slayer type of a deal going on here. And see, we got a whole bunch of different parts here. Now one of the reasons to use oils, especially on a thing like this, is there's a lot of, you can see there's a lot of similar colors, and I'm going to enlarge that reference over there real quick so you can get a better look at it. Here, let's orient these the same way. Now it's actually even got some, looks like a little bit of verdigris on there. May or may not try that, that could be fun. But when you have all these things that are sticking out here and stuff in the way, sometimes there's just no way to do that in sub-assemblies, as people call it, because you can paint them and you can shade them, and then you put them on the miniature, say, wow, I lit that backwards. So to avoid that sort of thing, I like to put them all together, and because oils let you get actual washes and mixing in areas where you ordinarily might not be able to, I thought this could really be a good demonstration of that. Now, you can see we've got, I'm just going to paint it as similar to essentially the box art, because we've never really done that matched box art or anything along those lines. So what I'm going to do here is hopefully we're going to be ending up at the, yep, right there, Black Sun Miniatures. You can see I've got a bunch of these as reference pictures that may go up over time as we work on this. So you can see 14 parts. It is a resin figure. Not necessarily the most simple thing to put together, not the worst thing to put together, but that's what we're going to do. And obviously we're going to have to do these in separate parts because that's just a wee bit too big for this particular filming area. Now I mentioned we're going to use oil paints. I got a palette sitting out here. It's the exact same parchment paper that I use on my wet palette for acrylics. Difference is, this is the sort of paint we're going to use on it. So we got some Winsor Newton oils, and they are really the most basic for right now. We're going to have the Payne's Gray and Raw Umber. You could, and you've seen me do this in earlier episodes here. Let's see if I can actually get this without knocking the paints all over. So a set of 10 Cotman, Winton, sorry. I'm thinking brushes, but Winton oil paints. About $27.8-ish on Amazon. Oilbrushers are definitely a little more expensive, and we're going to take you to the Mig site here in a little bit to show you these guys. Now, it's a little bit of a review because I haven't used these in a while. This is an awful lot like a, what was this, a mascara type container here, because you got the little brush here. You're not going to use the brush. What you're going to do is use the brush to put the paint out on the palette. And these, and I've used them enough to know, they will dry faster than standard oils, and they dry pretty flat. That is what they are designed to do. And we've got a bunch of different colors here. Some of these on the warmer side. Earth, clay, and rust. I really love that terracotta right there. When you mix it sometimes with, say, a color like this Mecha Light Green, you can get some really interesting flesh tones. And we've got there's some other lighter colors. They're going to show up over time. And then we've even got some things here that we could potentially use for the armor. Space purple, I'm not really using it as purple. We've got a really nifty field green. Yeah, that's what it's called. This is another one of my favorites right here. But you do want to shake these up every so often here, if you can. And again, like I said, you use your brush to get that paint out onto the palette. Let's take you over to the Mig Ammo site. Now, they're sold in a few different types of sets. There's the big set of 20 some odd of these things. There's also these little subsets. So you can see Earth Color set, because they're kind of made for, well, they're supposed to be made for weathering, but now that they've got the Mecha set, think of that Mecha Light Green, that's sort of a verdigris type color when you really think about it. So here's your big sets right here. Was there 20 in there? That's obviously the most economical way to get them. you might end up with some things that you don't need to use. I have been able to find these in individuals on Amazon. They will be a little more expensive, but if you're in the US, it does mean they're going to get there in a couple of days, and it should be free shipping too. These, as you saw, they're in euros. They're going to be coming from Spain most likely. So if time is an issue, shipping is an issue, then you can find these on Amazon. And also if you don't want the big set, because what if I just want to replace this? Do I really want to be placing an order for just this one thing? And I'm pretty sure you're not going to get free shipping with just one oil brusher. So it's a little strategery there. Another critical item here. And sorry that the label is starting to get a little beat up, but that is Speedball Mona Lisa is the name of the year. Let me turn off this light. There we go. Mona Lisa is sort of the sub-brand. Speedball is more of the overall brand. See where it says odorless paint thinner? Well, it means what it says. Because all that other, the cheaper stuff, just do yourself and your paint a favor. Get this. You can get it in smaller containers than this. It actually, pound for pound, it's more like the pricing of, say, the oil brushers, but it's worth it because it's going to be easier on your paint and it's going to be easier on you. And really, there is no smell to it. It just doesn't have any smell whatsoever. That's what I really love about it. So what we will do is we're going to probably do more on the base first, but the idea is we'll work on the base, work on the figure, probably set her aside, do a little more on the base, because the idea is you rotate around, and what that does is it gives the paint just those few critical minutes to sort of sit there and kind of coagulate a little bit, and I don't want to say dry, but it just settles down, and you can do so much more with it when you let it settle down. As far as brushes go, really not a whole lot of fancy stuff here. It's going to be your usual craft brushes. And we'll have a bunch of these because remember, we want to have some as blending brushes too. So there's your set, and you can see it's $5 for all of them. Can't really beat that now, can you? And obviously, when they're newer, they're a little more pristine, have a better point. When they're more beat up, they get looking a little bit more like this, but then they also become a good filbert brush. And we're gonna explore all of that when we get to the actual video. So next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get some paint on this, and the whole idea is this is just, I used a glue stick, right? Put the parchment paper on a piece of cardboard. This will absorb some of the excess oils. I know some people, they will paint on a paper towel or something like that. For me, that's just, I want to have some of that oil in there because, well, why am I using oils if all I'm trying to do is dry them out immediately? So what we'll do is we'll get our colors out here, and we're going to get to work with our oil brushers, and we'll do that next. So we're back, and what we're going to do is we got our paint out on the palette here, and I'll show you how it's been arranged. We've got the Payne's Gray here, the raw umber over there. I did also add this. This is burnt sienna. This is one of those Winton colors that you saw. So we're going to put that back in its box. Just the reason with the oil brushes is they will dry a little bit faster. Now, think of if you just slap this straight up oil paint on there, that's going to take longer to dry. But when you're thinning it down to miniature paint level, guess what? Not going to take quite so long to dry. You're also taking a little bit of the oil away here, so there's a lot of things. We're adding more of this, so there's a lot of things that you are going to do to actually cut down on the amount of oil. Now, both of these have the white spirits in them. This one's going to be mostly for brushes over here. See, I got myself a little bit of my same chamois sponge over there. The pipette is actually, we're going to employ that right now. It's going to be used over here. So straight away, we are already removing some of the oil just by doing that. Now remember, there was a point a while back I'd made my own oil brushers for the most part. That was really fun. I still have those. That's something maybe we discuss. This is going to take 2 parts to finish off, so yeah, let's just grab a little more of this. And now, in the past, when I made those oil brushers, you saw I was practically using this like almost like a wash or something. It's a little less so now. It's actually, we're kind of scrubbing it in a little bit more. So we're going to take now our raw umber. We're going to do the same thing, and we will have to do this a few times. This is really not that much different than, say, what we do with the Reaper Clears and liner paints, where we do that initial glazing. Now, I suppose, gee, how could you put it? The initial glazing is a whole lot shorter and a little less targeted, especially now the way we work with some of the pro acryls and the transparents and such and the contrast. Not doing as much removing of paint, but the shaded base coat kind of lasts a whole lot longer. I don't want to say to infinity, but it definitely lasts a wee bit longer. So you can see, look at this. Look at the consistency of that is about the same as those oil brushers. Heck, might even be a little bit thinner. So that's regular oil paint that just with the minor addition of some of that really nifty white spirits, well, we turn that to a nice little glaze. Now, the last thing I'm going to hit here is the foot, because you can see it's going to bounce around an awful lot during this rather aggressive phase. And this is going to be pretty similar to other instances where we basically, what will we say? We change the color as we rotate around. Like here, maybe more Payne's gray, because we want that to have a bit more of a bluish tint. And then where we want maybe more of a reddish tint to start, that's where we use our sienna. And you can see this is a little bit, I don't want to say gentler, but it's a little less rigorous than, say, some of the early oil painting episodes. Now, like my regular acrylic painting technique evolves pretty much every time I paint, so it kind of stands to reason that something that I've used much less, like the oils, we're going to be sort of altering our techniques all the time, especially as there's new materials that pop up there too. So let's just use the AK Interactive stuff as an example, those Optilungs. Now, those I learned a very hard lesson. You need to use this matte medium, otherwise they dry massively glossy, which this doesn't do. This in no way, shape, or form actually will either of these dry glossy. There's times where I haven't done any of the dull coating or whatever afterwards. Looked at them and almost lost track of were they oils or not. That's just how flat they are designed to dry, which is a really nifty thing. Now already, this is that crazy instance where I have to remind myself that these are oils. I was just about to go grab one of my sponges, one of those makeup sponges, and hurriedly wipe away the extra paint. And I went, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because all of this paint that we are using right now should still be, well, maybe not as fresh as right now, but by the end of this, it's still going to be basically wet, as if we had just put it on there. And that's a big difference with oils, and I know for some people that's a bit of a hurdle, and I understand that, I realize that. Now my lighting has changed a little bit here. What it has done, I wish it could be a little bit lighter for me. However, this makes it a little less of the reflections for you. So there may be times, especially say in the more finished stages of things, that you're going to see me maybe turn the other light on and things could get a little bit bright. And I apologize in advance for that. But sometimes needs. I mean, you just have to kind of go with it. And you can see, okay, we're going to do a sword blade here. Well, this is the equivalent to, say, blue liner. If you're going with the clear paint analogy / metaphor, whatever you want to call that. It's not really going to make it blue, but it gives it a little tint, and then when we put the subsequent layers on there, that's going to give us... The whole point of using oils, right, is wet blending. Well, if we have no wet paint under the paint we apply, well, that sort of takes the wet out of wet blending and just makes it zero blending. Now, another reason why I think I went with this approach and less of the super watery approach, it was faster, I think, to cover everything with that more let's just call it liquid approach. I mean, we're not using water here, so I'll try and get out of that habit there. And see, well, speaking of habits, I just started to make it more liquid so that it would flow easier. So old habits, they die hard sometimes. It has to do with a little less spatter management, I suppose. But it uses up a little bit less, because one of the advantages of oils is that you sort of push the paint around. It's not like the acrylics where you have to apply it, and basically one brushstroke equals this much coverage. With oils, you can take a little tiny dot of paint and just spread that darn thing all over the place. You would be amazed. It's like loaves and fishes of paint. Oh, that's... Boy, I wish I could write that down. I'm just going to actually write that down. Sorry. I just have to do that because that's kind of cool. So, yeah, I did that. And I think we've got sort of coverage here. Again, it's a little bit dark for me to see, but it does make it better for you. Now, we will set this down right there. Let's grab some of our sponges. We got a few different types. We got these. We've got these. Actually, I'm going to have to get some more of these now because there's a bunch of oil videos that are all going to hit sort of one after the other here. Now, this is something I didn't do as much. Oh, good. You can see it here. So I really had to work with the camera angle on this, and I'm hoping... see, this is kind of nifty here. Able to do that. And doesn't just give me more sponges, it gives me a little bit more targeted use. And there's another thing I'm going to do here, and that is I almost never, ever use two gloves. But I've kind of learned the hard way that I kind of have to at this stage. Alright, let's do this thing. And you can see how much that takes off. But what I wanted to do was leave some paint behind that's just a little less liquid for those subsequent layers. I've found it's a little bit more efficient to do something like this. Now I'm going to just have to hold it by the foot, because otherwise that pin is going to give way, and that's a pretty solid pin, by the way. There, just see, look at how much comes off, but you can see a fair amount stays behind. And this is why I learned to wear the gloves, because otherwise you're gonna see I already got oil paint all over my fingers. So, but here, look at this. See, we can be a little more precise with these. These are, I think these are for eyeliners or something. Not eyeliners, for eyeshadow brushes. Look at me, Mr. Maybelline. And the goal here is not to have some kind of perfect subshading left over by the time we're done with this removal of paint. That is not what we're after. It's a bit like, I don't want to say priming the surface because people get confused with primer. And as always, the primer on this is regular Badger Stino Res, as always. Here, let's just chuck these off to the side. There we go. And what we'll do is we'll let this sort of sit. Right, we'll let that just sit there. And we will move on to the base. Let's see how, look at that, it's leaving some nifty little shadows there in the face. I'm going to grab another one of these. I think I'm pretty well stocked on these. I didn't really use them as often as I used to, and I think that's why I have some more. But here, look at that. That's pretty fun. Just to be able to do that. I don't know. This is actually, every part of oils is just more mellow than working with the acrylics, because I told you earlier that I had to stop myself and go, why are you rushing and flailing around? You don't have to do that. The whole point of this is that you can just relax, take your time. The blending's going to be there for you. It's not going to go anywhere. Take your time. Now, when it comes to army painting, and another reason I'm doing this is because I've got some other episodes, army painting series coming up that involves oils and other such things. But you want to really enjoy the full efficiency of oils. That's where it's not a bad idea to have these multiple projects. Now, it could be a couple of busts. Heck, it could be 3 or 4 of them. It could be a unit or a vehicle or 2 or 3 and a squad of something. So that's how I recommend that you think of the oils. Doesn't mean that's how you got to use them, but sort of think of them in that way and you'll get some nifty results. So there we go. That's kind of nice. Let's see how that actually looks. And this is a little dark. Yeah, you can see there's a little bit of, not so much shading but tinting. You can see the raw sienna in places and the burnt sienna and the Payne's gray. What I have to do now is I'm just gonna find myself a safe spot for this to repose while we work on some other things. Oh, this is a nifty one. I don't know if we've tried this. We may give that a shot. I'm gonna put that out there because there's another dark. Yeah, there's this dark green here, but oh, what the heck! Before I forget, I don't think I've even used this one yet. Now there is a little bit of difference in consistency with these, and as I put this out, I can immediately see why it is different, because this is phthalo green basically, and that you can see how transparent that is. Yeah, and that is, you would have it happen with regular oil paint too, and I'm going to show you in just a sec. Here we go. So this is, well, basically this is a phthalo green right here. It's called Viridian Hue, but there's sort of both one and the same. Alright. I'll make sure my palette's not going anywhere. It seems to be stable. Alright. Oops, I gotta get rid of this glove here for now, because the brush, I went to hold the brush in my hand and I went, why does this brush wish to fly out of my hand? That's not good. So we are going to actually see, and I almost, it's a bit of a rabbit hole. I almost thought, I should mix a little bit of that green in there. Maybe we'll throw a touch, but I'm looking at that dragon head and not a lot of green in it, but there's actually an awful lot of this Payne's gray. So let's get down to it, except maybe we'll grab just a few little, that's it. We'll go that far. Alright. And this is going to be, it's just really, really dark. Obviously, this If you're wondering where that little plinth comes from, that is from Secret Weapon Miniatures. I don't know for sure if the resin plinths are still being made. I'm gonna guess yes. If not, I'll just tell you in the next video. Say, hey, I looked. They don't have the resin plinths anymore. They're heavy. They are really heavy. But then this is also a big chunk of resin sitting on top of it. And the rest of this is tree bark, in case anybody wanted to know. Which we're going to start to, again, get some of this raw umber on there. And at this point, some of the raw umber that is going to be applied to this, it's as close to an oil brusher as you're going to get without being an oil brusher. Now, there is clearly some other things in the formula than just white spirits in there. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. Now, Secret Weapon or whoever, Secret Weapon Miniatures, whoever else, if I can actually speak to them in the process of making their oils, well, then I can sort of relay that info to you. But for right now, yeah, that's just going to be, actually might even just throw a little bit of that purple color in there. That's going to be a bit of blood right there. So we're going to have a whole bunch of blood effects going on. Clearly, that will not be in this episode because that's got to dry. It has to be dried fully before you put blood effects over that. I've already done blood effects over the oils and absolutely no issues whatsoever. I mean, it's dry. I think I maybe dull coated it. It maybe probably wasn't even necessary, but I just did it. Thinking, why not? Here, we're just going to hit the rest of this tree bark here for our base, while still mixing in a little bit of our raw umber. And the two of those together, they make a different sort of, well, we'll just call it dark gray. I don't really like to call it just black. Now, I realize this is a different medium, but, that think of when you're making black or whatever, it's blue and brown, and essentially Payne's gray and raw umber together is like mixing a blue and a brown. That's basically what you are doing at that point. Now, some portions of this maybe are going to be a little hard for you to see, especially like the undersides of these. I guess you can still see it. So instead of bony tusks, this particular dragon right here has almost like a spiny outcropping there. So that's an interesting and different way to render that. Almost good to go here with the initial glaze on this. And there. A little more. Sponge time. Oh, I almost forgot my glove. Almost forgot it. Here, let's get that. I'm going to grab a different one here, because I just realized that one is inside out, which means I basically directly apply the oil stuff that's on that to my hand. We don't want that. So it'll be a little bit easier to take this stuff away, but boy, I can see that tinting left behind. It's slightly greenish there. See here, it's almost a little bit more maybe towards the brownish side of things. And like I said, you don't want to wipe it out completely. That is by no means the goal. The other thing to just keep in mind now, if your surface is really rough, like this bark is pretty rough, there's a lot of things on the figure and on this base that sort of catch and want to rip the sponge. So sometimes that can leave some fuzzies behind. Just, I guess, be aware of that. It's another reason why I have these. They allow for maybe a little finer removal of paint. But they're a little less prone. You can see they pretty much just stay in one piece, instead of maybe tearing like the makeup sponges. Here, let's clean up those skulls. Let's take some of this so we can see just how much is being taken away. However, there is enough that's left behind. Gives this, it influences this. Tints it just like we would do with our normal initial glazes. Alright. We'll say that is enough of paint removing. I think you can, yeah, you can see a little bit of greenish tint there versus what we've got on her. So what we'll do is we are going to let this just have 5-10 minutes to sort of sit there and just coalesce a little bit, and then we're going to start to get into more opaque stuff. It's not really a shaded base coat. We're just going to get into applying opaque layers, and we're going to do that next. Let's do some work on this dragon head here, and I start to see a little bit of some reddishness in there too. That's going to be kind of interesting. Now, make this reference smaller again, maybe that size, so I can actually see some things. We've got a couple of different brushes here. So, like I've always talked about, these brushes, oh, I can turn this off. There. One is more beat up. Let's look at the handle here. As you can see, we've got that narrow edge and then a filbert style, but here, even this one, it's a little bit beat up, but it still has more of a point. And what's the point of that? Well, the point of that is we can use this as a blending brush. We can use it as an applicator brush. So many different uses. Now, and I think I know you've heard me mention it before, that when you do your initial layers that are thin, guess what? You got your next layers on top. If you want them to stick on there, they have to be thicker. With oils, one of the things you most have to be aware of is how thick your paint is on your brush and also on the figure. If it's too thin, if you got thin on thin, it just one's going to wipe away the other, and guess what? Thick over thick is going to do the same thing. Now this, as you can see, we haven't really reached for any of our white spirits, have we? And you can see this is starting to get a little bit of a greenish tint to it. Still with some blue, but I saw that red in there, so I don't want to forget about that. And by virtue of that initial glazed wash, whatever you want to call it, that we did, what starts to happen, yeah, look at that. Check that out. Yeah, it starts to take what's there, like right there. See, that is some of the Payne's gray that I had placed down there, and not all of it was wiped away. That is the whole reason why I don't wipe all of it away. It's just, yeah, think of it as sort of just preparing the surface for these subsequent layers of paint. I absolutely love this. I mean, I could just, it's not that I hate acrylic paints or anything like that, but boy, oh boy, just the chill factor here. Look at that nice little filbert brush. And what are we going to do? We are going to start blending some scales here. Look at that. Instead of having to glaze those scales or do all kinds of layers on them, what's happening? Paint's just mixing on there. I don't want to say it's doing it all by itself. Kinda is. A little bit. not a dry brush. Okay, with oils, yeah, that is damp brush, I would say, is the closest you're going to get to anything resembling a dry brush again. So, but yeah, look at this. Look at what I'm doing here. It's a feathered brush stroke. It is not all that dissimilar when I do sort of my faux dry brush type of stuff. It's about the same, but because we have wet paint and wet paint, I'm causing the paints to mix. Now, look at how dirty the end of that is. That is the other thing that's going to happen with oils that will not happen with acrylics, is you're going to have to worry about, see here, a couple of brush strokes and already that wet oil paint underneath, well, guess what? That gets transferred to your brush. And for those of you that have watched other oil painting episodes before, you know I talk about that all the time. That you've got to be aware of that paint transfer, that color transfer that's going to happen. Oh, look at this. I mean, again, another big old filbert brush, and now it starts to blend in with some of the raw umber that's over there. So I get a different color. Basically, I get a different color by applying the same color. Oh, man, I should write that down too. I guess we're just it's gonna be one of those videos that yields t-shirt worthy and sticker worthy phrases. You know what? I am also going to shoot a little bit of this over here. Now I'm thinking we're going to work on this for a certain amount of time, and I might just separate this out and then again let it sit. Next segment we'll grab our, oh, I know she has a name. I don't remember what the heck it is. I just kind of call it the Dragon Slayer Barbarian, and I know that it's not, that is not the name of it. Oh, look at how we can expand out that brush, which leads me to my next point. Let's say everything here was all dry. Something, for whatever, we got taken away for a few days. It dried, and oh man, there goes my chance. I blew it. I can't wet blend. That's the fun thing about oils, is that even if you're painting dry oils over wet oils, you can actually still, you can blend those by buffing them away. And I have done that on some previous episodes also. So yeah, this is just, here's it. We're going to just dance right over the edges of those scales. Let this really nifty mecha-like green. It's a favorite of mine. I think an awful lot of, let's say Vallejo, I know there's a verdigris green. Secret Weapon Miniatures has a verdigris green. I am sure Reaper Miniatures has a verdigris green. But to me, it goes, there's so many other things you can do with it, especially depending on what you mix with other things. So it's kind of predicated on that. Now, okay, let's get ourselves into, I'm going to get myself, looking at my warmer light colors here. Now think of these lighter colors that I'm going to add. Yeah, you can see that. Think of these as more like the Maggot White / Maiden Flesh. I realize to some of you this is going to seem completely different than all I've done with, say, the Reaper liners and clears and the transparents and everything else and the contrast paints. It's really the same principle. I'm taking, well, I don't want to say transparent darker colors, but we're just taking a few, right, dark colors, and then we're taking some lighter colors and turn them into mid-tones, right? It's, I guess I'm trying to get people to think of these things as being more similar instead of just so wildly different. Now I'm going to go into my Payne's Gray over here with some of that warmer, look at that nifty new gray that we just made. We're going to expand that brush out like so, make a real nifty filbert brush, and we're going to go right over these rocks here, which will probably for sure get some leaves, but I'm also tempted to throw in some plants. Now, there is some new stuff on the way. It's from Luke's APS or ABS. I think it's Luke's APS. Well, anyways, if it arrives in time, then for our final sort of basing segment here, I might try to use, there's a few things that are some flock and some moss and other things that I want to give a try. Now, okay, over here, look at this. I'm taking the same coat, but it's creating a whole different look now by virtue of that. If oil paint had a maiden flesh color, that's it. That's really pretty darn close. But also, it starts to warm this up a bit. Starts to warm that up. Again, it's tree bark. Now the skulls themselves, that's part of the actual base. I just put some of this tree bark around it, sort of surrounded it like that. Now, I'm going to grab a little bit of this, and now remember, we have to get some differences in the thickness of our paint. So now remember I told you can't dry brush, but look at this light brush stroke here, very feathered. It may not be quite the same as a dry brush. It's actually better because you're not going to be left with that typical kind of graininess that a dry brush leaves behind. So to me, that much better. Now let's get some other. You know what? Let's get a little bit of this in here now. All right, so we're going to take some of our raw umber here, even a touch of that raw sienna. And I want to make things warmer. Now I can also glaze here too, and I can glaze right now if I wanted to. I do not have to sit there and, good grief, wait for this to dry, for some ungodly reason, cover it in gloss varnish or something like that, and then glaze. No. And I don't even do that on vehicles, much less miniatures. So again, all that is good in this world, please don't be thinking you got to wait for all this stuff to dry and then do that gloss varnish stuff. It's an invitation to me, it's an invitation for your paint to get wiped away. Because imagine if you were just painting on glass and then covered it with more glass and then painted on that glass, which was then covered with more glass, which you then cover with more glass on top of that. Gee, what could possibly go wrong? So I'm thinking maybe let's not be doing that. Here. Now we're going to go back to this, only a touch lighter. And now I'm actually going to add just a little bit of white spirits there. And what should happen is this should really sort of cover it. So I'm going to have to, see how that, if I had just gone with the same level of thickness of paint, it would have covered, but it would have pulled away as much as it covered. Now look at that. See, it's getting dirty, so I have to go back to my paint here. And remember that this brush stroke alone does not have to be the entirety of the blending. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to plop some paint here. Oh, let's find another another brush that we can use for some blending here. So we got another one of these, and we're going to use it to blend like that. Look at that. See, it's just a big old hard edge. Well, it used to be a hard edge. Now, looks more like an airbrushed edge. No fuss, no muss. Like so. Let's continue. Key for that, once again, a little alteration of just how thick the paint was. And it was slight. I don't do formulas and ratios and all that, but just a smidge. There's a precision measurement for you. A smidge. And by smidge, you're talking 1%. I don't know. It's just minimal. But remember, each time I do that, though, I'm gonna have to add a little bit more if I want it to stick. Yeah, it just there's the time-saving element to this, of course. That's what really makes it great for the army painting aspects and everything else. But just, I mean, look at this. I went back over to these scales. Look at that. That's horrible, right? It's just a big old blob of paint. Well, again, it was it was a blob of paint. Now it's a blended scale. Other advantages to this, and I know I've talked about this, especially in the army painting series. If you do get interrupted, something happens or whatever, just life, can happen. You can go back to these things. You could essentially do this, and I could come back tomorrow. This will be mostly wet. Now we've added some thicker paint over this, so that's going to make it last a little bit longer. But those initial glazes that I did with all that white spirits in there, waiting too long. By this time tomorrow night, I don't want to say it would be dry, but it would certainly, some parts would be close to tacky. That's for sure, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Here, let's just hit some of these scales back here. Remember, this is just the start of the blending. We can hit with other colors in here. I could glaze some of that purple down in the crevices. I won't do that right now. I would actually probably want to work on the figure itself, the barbarian, our dragon slayer first. See, I need a little bit more. Again, it's hard for you to see. Wow, wow. I'm just glad that there's minimal shininess on this. It's dark for me. He's turned the darkness down about 15%. That's what my world is like here, as far as trying to see this. But for you, that's not too shabby. Not too shabby. Here, I say I'm going to have to. I'm already. Yep, I had to go a little bit more with my white spirits in there to get that to stick. The paint sort of tells you. I've had people ask me, so when do you know when your paint stops sticking? If you don't already, you're newer to it, you don't really have a handle on, well, just when the paint is maybe whatever, it'll tell you. At a certain point, it will say, hello, I need to be thinner, or the other way around. Now, that's a little bit of sky blue. I do believe that's what they called it. Yeah, it's just sky blue. Looking to change the paradigm here a little bit. Now I'm going to want that out there for my weapons anyways. Now you could use smaller brushes for this too. You don't have to use brushes this size, but I mean, you're going to take more advantage of what you have by virtue of these larger brushes. Now what I'm actually going to do, I got my brightness up to about 53. I'm actually going to put it back down to normal again. Ironically enough, I actually have to look at the screen to see what this looks like. So that's new and different for me. Okay, now before I forget, here, let's do something with some red. I want to see a little bit of, look at that, nifty little purple tone there. We're just gonna look at that. See how I can dust this right in here. Watch that. It's mixing with those darker colors that we put in at first. It helps to automatically sort of tone this down. Oh, okay. I'm gonna put this here too. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. Well, I'm gonna go out here too with it. Not that the ends of these are going to be purple, but I'm just thinking about color variation. Heck, I mean, I'll throw some of this into my rocks because we are going to go right over this now. Again, look at that. It lets me get a little bit of that purple into there. Hardly even noticeable. Notice I haven't fooled around with the teeth yet because we're doing so much of this type of blending around here that it's just, if I'm trying to work my way around the teeth already, again, think about why are the oils being used? What's the purpose behind it? It's to get that blending in the broadest of areas. Now just think of some of those, and I have some from Big Child Creatives, and think of those orc busts with they want the purple lips and the green skin and all that kind of stuff. Well, look at how this really helps facilitate, instead of just glaring like, well, boy, we just translated from green to purple, boom. This is going to help you make that look a little more gradual. Needless to say. Remember, we can do more glazes into this, so many other things that we can do. I'm almost, in a way, seeing a metallic treatment on the scales. And like I see, I'm starting to dust some of this purple into there too. And that's really more of a kind of a magenta-ish, muted magenta, I guess. But this is where that blending takes place. People, I don't even think they would be able to tell that we even put that purple in there. Probably would not even be able to tell. And I can still do glazes over the top of that also. Now I'm going to grab, this is I think a cadmium red medium here. This is again part of the Winton set. It is cadmium, no, it's cadmium red deep. It's kind of a fun color there. Now there's some other purples. There's I think it's a diazonine purple or whatever that may make an appearance. Either this episode, maybe the next. Possibly the next. There we go. A little bit of that now. I'm going to thin that down. See, it's got some reddishness to it, and I just want to make sure I remember to get some of this over here too. I am not going to sweat this part because, well, we're probably going to have some blood effects and other things over here, so it pretty much just has to get the point across, so to speak. Now I'm going to just assume that that other stuff there is going to be some sort of bone. Also notice how many times have I cleaned my brush, and I'll kind of do the air quotes with that. I haven't cleaned it at all. No need to be cleaning the brush. Look at this. Yeah, and just let that. Once you learn, or just get a handle for learning, I suppose is part of it. To get a handle for how stuff blends and everything else, what I'm doing here is going to be just a whole lot easier for you. And look at this. We'll just put a couple of blobs in there, and there. Now you can see it. I'm just going to do a little bit of blending here. So just blob and blend. There's an interesting technique, blob and blend. I like that. I think I've created again something new. Skulls. That's actually field green, which looks incredibly light on there. And it's not. That is not light at all, but this is going to be more of a, let's say, a jungle environment or whatever. That's where I need to think about these skulls maybe need to be a bit darker. Now here I'm purposely taking some paint that's just not, it's practically straight out of the container. There's no thinning of it. And the idea is and look at too, we're picking up the color that's already there, so it's, like I said, it's blending itself right there on the miniature. Well, I don't know how mini this miniature is. I'm gonna just take a peek at that. Okay. I'm just going to pop a few little quick reflected light things here, more as a bit of a notation to myself. Now I'm going to take a, let's go with a bit of our yellow over here and some of that red. I'm going to make that a little bit more on the wetter side. Then it's going to start to, the teeth, we're going to get a little more of the purple, and it makes it a little more of an ochre. Again, nowhere near any kind of a permanent color or anything along those lines. Might have to get out some more of the, a bit more of my basically maiden flesh type color there. And now I'm just going to, see how that blends into my rocks there just a touch. Because we got a whole bunch of gray, not much else. But I don't want to get that too fizzy with color or anything like that, because, well, we got blood effects to put on there. We're going to have lots of flock and leaves and everywhere else. So even on something that's as large as this 75mm figure, it still have to think, okay, what's the end game here? We'll even let a little bit of that brownish color get onto the horns there, such as the case is. But when you use something like this here, the white spirits, instead of just taking a paper towel, you're going to get a lot of, well, white spirits into that brush, and the thing you think is going to happen is going to happen. You're going to have an issue with, your paint's going to get all kinds of thin when you don't expect it to be. And it can be, especially in the beginning, of your painting journey with this stuff. It can get complicated enough, and then you have to start worrying about, well, adding extra thinness to something when you didn't want it there. Let's see. I'm going towards my... Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit more of that lighter color. Now, I could just use a titanium white. However, what is this? This is yellow bone. There's a few nice lighter colors like this in the oil brusher range. Just, to me, it's advantageous to have something like this that it already starts out thinner. I know it will dry faster, and I know it will dry flatter. So see, look at that. We can already start to pick out some lighter scales here. Yeah. We are nowhere near white whatsoever. And all of it, I keep thinking I gotta go back and blend those. Oh my gosh, I just put that paint there. I can't leave that sit there. But I can. Now, of course, there's a flip side to this. You paint with the oils for a while, and generally that's what you're gonna do, is work with these, because you're trying to line up all your projects to maximize this efficiency here. And you'll have to get used to the fact that, oh, it's acrylics again. Can't do my wet blendy thing. Can't do that anymore. Then you get your sad face. Now, like I said, there will be some glazes on this, but they will work differently. I know I've mentioned it a few times already, but just for those that have seen the oil painting episodes before, you know that it's a whole different animal when you're going to use the oils for glazing. Look at the difference we've got here as we now start to add some lighter colors on top of this. Yeah, check that out. You can see how that new, this lighter, it's blending right with some of the purple and the yellow ochre that I put there. If you do the glazing in the way you would do it with acrylic paints, you are not going to be a happy camper. You have to think in terms of just put your glaze on the brush, right? And then you take it over to the figure and you touch it to the spot and you let the paint do all of the rest. The paint moves around, and that can be scary for people that are used to having total control over their paint. Well, with oils, sometimes you just have to kind of take your hands off of the reins and let the oils do their thing. And it's called either a pin wash, panel line wash. There's a few different terms for that. But it's what's amazing, and I know I had to show this to someone because they just didn't believe me that it worked that way, but the oil paints, they can go, see all these craggy crevice type things, that wash is going to go in there all by itself. You don't have to direct it down in there. That is just the amazing thing, gotta say. Now let's see what we can do on his teeth here. We're going to do some glazing into this. But right now, all it is, think of this as sort of an extended, modified, shaded base coat. Ah, there's another one there. It's not the most accurate phrase necessarily, but it's the best I can do. Now there's another thing too. See how my hand is making contact with the, what was it now? That means you're going to be potentially wiping some paint away. So that's something to keep in mind. I mean, it's no big deal. It's not like any of these are finished colors or whatever. I'm going to get myself maybe a bit more of a pinkish color to some of these areas. Because remember, all the darker tone, I want that to be the blood effects, which will be translucent, right? And you'll be able to, and they'll have actually a depth to them. So once again, just gonna, even the smaller brush, I can use it as a blending brush. I think this is actually one of the, yeah, it's an optimal brush. It wasn't really the niftiest brush in the world, so I don't mind. It got a little bit beat up, to say the least, but really not a tragedy. Some of the other ones have been a little bit better, the larger ones. Okay, and I'm going to call this one. We're just going to leave this. Again, we got to let this sort of sit here, chill out. I might just extend some of this right out to here. Alright, we'll just leave this sit now, just to have a little time to kind of let the paint relax. Again, not dry. And we're going to work on our, well, the lady that just killed this guy, and we'll do that next. We're back, and it's time to put some of those initial layers on our barbarian lady here, just for lack of a better term. Now, we've got, let's see what we want to do with this here. I'm going to start out, remember our little flesh tone we talked about here. So we're going to figure out which areas here are actually a little bit of skin. We're going to actually thin that down a little bit. Now, like I showed you with that phthalo green color, that's going to be, each one of these is going to have a little difference in its translucency. Look at this. See how some of the initial glazes mixed in with that and almost gave it a little bit of a brownish appearance or a grayish. That's fantastic, because there's an awful lot of those type of tones in our skin tones. Or anyway, that's interesting. That's all metal, not fingers, so we're not going to bother with that. Let's get a little reflected light onto that. Alright. Then we're just gonna get some of this even on our weapons here. Think of it as reflecting some of the ground color. That's what I'm hoping for. That all of those early initial glazes just kind of mix right in. But this is just going to be thicker, and it makes sense because anything like a yellow ochre, a sienna, by their very nature, those colors are going to be more translucent, thinner. I guess, I don't know. In some ways, think of it with miniature paint. There's some colors that when you use them, they just seem to be thinner, right? You have to think of the oils, even more colors would be like any kind of phthalo green, phthalo blue. Think alizarin crimson, which if there was a phthalo red, that would be it. So again, just doing these things to spread around a little bit of reflected color. Just, we're not worried about painting an exact skin tone here, anything like that. I just got to figure out what is what here. Looks like a dry brush, not a dry brush. Alright, that's fine. Let's think about our golds here. Now that is where something that's a little bit more along the greenish side. Remember that yellow ochre I was talking about? Well, we've got ochre right here. When you haven't used these in a while, I suggest you probably shake them up a little bit, which is what we did. Gotta find myself a spot to put this here. And look, you can see how little oil paint I'm actually using. Just so much less than the acrylic paint. So think of oils as there's savings in other areas that you just don't get with standard acrylic paints. And we're going to be down and dirty with this too. Just like we were on the skin tones, we're going to let things sort of mix together. Actually, I shouldn't probably do too much on the foot there because remember, now we're still in that phase of things that are a little more rigorous. Eventually that will be taken over by the more delicate work. Now you saw how it was on the dragon head, that we're really hammering away at that thing, and all of a sudden being a little bit more on the gentle side with it. The other thing too, I have to think about the reflections of, say, the dragon head that she's actually standing on. And see, I'm thinking it's now, of course, if this is meant to be gold and yet they put a verdigris effect on it, well, not quite sure why. Now this is why I didn't get into the skin tones more, unless parts of this are supposed to be gold. See how that is blending with that initial glaze. It just makes a whole different color. I absolutely love that. I can't tell you enough just how nifty that is. Oh, that needs to be gold too. Awful lot of fur in places on this, as you, I suppose, would have on something that's more of a barbarian in nature. I'll even let some of that ochre get onto these. And see how that's already starting to blend together there. That's just it's almost like an easy button. It's not, because you're gonna have to figure out how these really work. It's not gonna be that quite so simple the first couple times around, which is why I will over and over again emphasize you need to be patient with yourself, because there's potentially frustrating moments that you're going to run across. Now let's alter this just a bit here. Just the tiniest. Little tiny bit to make that flow, and now we're gonna essentially do a bit of a shaded base coat here with our armor. I'm even gonna let that get a little bit lighter there. See, look at how that look at that quick transition right there. Just when you get a handle for this stuff, and just see again, look at how I'm just dusting this over the top. It will almost seem like it can't be that simple. Now it's not that simple, really. You still have to know the principles of things, colors, that sort of stuff. And it's going to it's going to take some practice. I know some folks that did really take to oils right away, and I know for other folks they really struggled with them mightily because they couldn't get their head around the differences. They basically wanted the oils to be a slow drying acrylic. These are not slow drying acrylics. If you want slow drying acrylics, get things like drying retarder or something like that and use the acrylics, because that's not what these do. That's not why you're using them. There's a whole different purpose. And I can only say it so many times, you have to embrace the fact that these are very different from pretty much everything else you know. Again, we got the big old wide brush going. The way the glazing works on this, that notion that you have to be aware of what's thicker and what's thinner, things that you don't have to even think about with the acrylics. But then here, you can do all kinds of amazing blending without having to really think about it, or at least struggle with it over so many layers. Look at that. Here, let's hit it again. Just going to get that little hair off of there. And now using, see what's underneath there. It blends with this. That could have potentially taken a whole lot of extra time had this been acrylics. Now the tricky side of things is that you're going to kind of run out of handholds sometimes. But then you plan for that because you've done it. You have experience. Think of it when let's say you mess around with something like a non-metallic metal or a lighting effect or whatever. You haven't done that before, and it's your first time trying that. It's going to take some time to get used to. Now I just need to get a little bit more of my lighter skin tone out here. Just bear with me. I need it for a couple different things there. And I think it is time. Aha, here we go. Here we go. I'm going to play with some other things now. So we got, this is Windsor Yellow Deep. It's sort of a cadmium yellow deep. And I just shook the tube. Not sure why I was shaking a paint tube. But you will see a distinct difference between the almost lemon yellow of the oil brusher and this. Now we're going to grab another one here. I could either grab the Winton green. I'm going to just grab this one because this one is cadmium green. I'm just going to zoink that right over there. So these, there might be an oil brusher color there, but we're just going to, I just wanted to mess around with these now. You can see it's thicker, right? But look at this, I'm letting the oil brusher mix with it. A couple of reasons why. I noticed that when you let the oil brushers mix with the regular oils, it actually make them dry faster and less shiny. Two great tastes that go together, I guess. Look at this, we're gonna, and it looks like a dry brush. I mean, it's effectively the same motion, I suppose, as a dry brush, but look at all the things it's going to do for you. Now, would it be more difficult to say 10 minutes from now or 5 minutes from now try to do tattoos on her skin? Well, yeah, that would be more difficult. But then you're trading one advantage maybe for a different one. Mine is that I absolutely love. Just being able to do that is... It's not like you can't do something like this. There's a few painters that do the, what would you call it, highly specialized type of dry brushing. But it's an intentional thing. That's not like they're just kind of dry brushing the dry brush. It's almost like their brush stroke. Just like, let's say you're doing calligraphy and you're doing the J stroke versus the Y stroke or whatever. They're using those in a very targeted, special way, and that's really neat too. This is also, I don't often get a chance. Well, I don't often get a chance to paint 75 mil figures, period. But especially with the oils, I've been able to do it a few times, and that just it's a real treat. Okay, what am I looking for? We're gonna hit a few of these areas now. And I'm gonna get my lighter color back in here again. This is, oh, what was this? An ivory, I'm assuming. Oh, well, yellow bone. Yeah, ivory. Okay, still got my filbert orientation here. Just very quickly. And this is not the lightest highlight that I can do. It's a lighter highlight that I'm going to just hit in a few of these places. Because we also now have to think about the principles of non-metallic metal too. It's oils and all that, but the idea of, well, what would you say? Gosh, I hate using the color theory term, but color theory is color theory, and anywhere where there's color, there's a theory. And no, I won't make you wait as I write that down, because I still think that's a nifty phrase. Alright, then I'm gonna waltz over into this bit of a green over here. Sorry. I'm gonna wipe the excess on that towel there. You know how much I like greens in my golds. I mean, you saw it for a whole huge chunk of the Cypher Lords video. Gonna do a little bit of that here. Geez, things like the sword blades and such. But it just looks so much like a dry brush, and yet not a dry brush. I'm gonna get into some of the fur with this. There are weapons galore on this lady here. I'm gonna even get some of this green into the skin tone here a little bit, especially in shadow-ish areas. Now I've got this is the color that we were using on our... Yeah, see how that's... Look at that. Even that, I don't want to say it's dry, but it's a little bit more coagulated there. That's kind of interesting. And not at all unexpected. Not at all. And I apologize. This kind of bounces around a lot. I'll try and maybe stabilize that a little bit for you. Here, let's see if that, yeah, that'll work. It's not like I got any other paint sitting there. I'm gonna go, again, that's just a touch of, just a little bit of the white spirits there. Now I had to push my other lights because I got my main light turned off. I've got 5 other lights that actually are pushed way, way closer than they normally are. So there could be some collisions with brushes and lights. And I'm going to actually do the hair a little bit different. It shows it is sort of being a brown there. There's just endless browns all over this thing. So I'm actually going to give that a touch of a kind of a it'll be darker, but for now I'm just going to give it sort of a bluish gray light, and then we'll do some glazing in there later on. I'm going to start to think about some of the weapons here. But because I have that initial little color to work with in there, so I can do this blending here. Let's do the axe head. Now that's going to be facing more towards the ground, so I think maybe a little less with the. And this it's a dirty sky blue. We'll use that phrase. And it's also really, really dark too. It is not light by any stretch of the imagination. Even this is really just sort of a middle tone that I just added into here. And once again, if I think, that's just not sticking the way it should, it's maybe then it is time to go get just a little bit of the white spirits. So when I use if I'm going to get back to the Optilung paints again, I'm going to have to almost substitute that matte medium in many places for this white spirits here. Because it's supposed to thin the paint down. I have no idea. It could actually, who knows, it could smell horrible. So I have been asked about the Optilungs, so that is why I've given those a try. The colors are going to be really, really similar to the oil brushers. There's Starship Filth. There's even that mecha. I think they even have a mecha light green. It's a long story. I won't get into it, but let's just say there's a lot of closeness. But one company was the other, and one sort of separated away. And the oil brushers are sort of a new version of those Optilungs or Optilungs. However it's pronounced, I really don't care necessarily about pronunciation of product names, because as we know, as I know, and I've said this over and over again, if a company can choose a horrible name for a product 99.9% of the time, they will do that. It's a name that really doesn't say what the product actually is, or worse yet, kind of gives you the wrong idea of what the product is. I've seen that far too many times. I can see that we're already starting to, and just in these very early stages, starting to build up some non-metallic metals here. I don't want to say it's some effortless thing or whatever, but Yeah, look at that. Can even start to work some of this into what's ostensibly going to be the gold, copper, brass, whatever. Not quite just sure of that yet. So I'm going to now move over towards some things in the skin. Just going to find my paper towel here, and so I'm just going to squeeze all that out of the brush. And now we're going to find ourselves a few different little skin tones here. Look, I got my red over here. Now, I'll eventually go with a smaller brush, but I'm going to go with a few different, essentially mid-tones here. I'm going to try and stabilize that foot there so this doesn't bounce around quite so much. A little bit of a disadvantage here in that I have to work around so many different, the armor and this and that and the other. So I won't quite be able to do some of the nifty little wide-ranging smooth blends. There's a little reflection on that. I get some more of that almost pink color there. Because remember, just like on the dragon head, I can get into some areas and do some more precision stuff later on. I'm just trying to figure out what parts are skin, what parts aren't. The fur, what we're going to do with that. And I am going to, so I'm going to get into, find a somewhat smaller brush here. Don't want to lose my paper towel. But now I will start to thin this down. Let's start to put a few little things into the face here. So obviously there will be more things done with the face, the dragon face, the eyes, that sort of stuff. Will probably lead off, I would say, in the next video with some of the glazes. We'll save those for that because I want to really give it sort of a special kind of an intro. Just the way we did it's kind of a return to glazing, right? Because that's what we did to start this thing off. It's more of a glazing style approach. Again, just hit the medium, or I keep thinking of it as a medium, but it's just the white spirits. See, I can even look. Took some of it away, and now we're gonna blend with this in the same way that we did. So I can even get that a little bit more on the pinkish side. And so I have to move it just so that I can see it too. Let's get some rosiness in the cheeks here. Again, I would have loved to not have the sword sitting there, but it was not viable, especially with the oils, to work with those pieces being separate like that. So it kind of is what it is. Now I will take some of the cameo red. We'll mix it with our brown, and we're going to get a few darks in here. Here, let's take some of our Payne's gray. I'll work that into the hair. I had hoped to actually be painting this while it was sitting on the base, but there was absolutely no way that was going to happen. There was no room in the inn for something like that. Now that I've got that, I need to start thinking about more darks in other places here. So just like we will do sometimes on the acrylic side of things, we work both ways. Sometimes dark to light, sometimes light to dark. Just depends on what you need. It really does depend on the situation. I've had people ask me that, oh, do you always work this way? I don't always work anyway. I have to change things all the time. So here we're going to get a little bit of our darker tone in there now. And potentially something along like that bit there that was acrylics. Maybe that was a glaze. Instead of me just taking some darker paint and dropping that in. Let's find ourselves some darks over here too. I'm gonna also dive into some, here, let's get a little bit of green into this. Yeah, I'm just looking to get a little bit of separation here between, say, these spear shafts and such, and those wrappings. It's not critical to have it exactly whatever at this point. I just need to. And now let's do some lighter stuff on these wrappings. No, we don't want that to be. Here we go. We're going to use something like this here. Kind of give it a warmer gray on some of these wrappings. Not quite as many as I thought there were. I thought there was actually a lot more. Once again, I'm going to throw out a little bit more of my ivory color here. And I've just got some green into that mix. Not going to do it on every single one of these strands. They're just a few, and now let's start to think about some reflected light here. Okay, so that is now lighter. We're going to go back with our Payne's Gray, also known as potentially blue liner. And now we go back to, see, we can add the darker stuff here, but then just like we did with the lighter, we blend that. Do the same on the other side here. But then again, we take some of that paint away. And now we can blend it into what we already have. We've got our little touch left of our bright mecha green. All of a sudden, we're starting to build up some edges here. What I just did was I've got my thumb is bracing my finger, and my hand is actually on my little cloth over there. Because I know people talk about their hands shaking and all that. Well, my hand, basically, this hand with the brush is actually anchored to my painting table. No kidding. You can do that and make that happen too. Now we're going to work in, again, I'm taking the ivory color. I also have my elbows secured on the table in another spot. I guess the other advantage of having the gloves is that I can use those. My hand is basically a palette right now. Now, you need to sort of be aware of that. Oh, do we want this? Yeah. Let's see if we can't. I'm just gonna maybe, instead of that being a metal, let's see if we can't make that something different. See, quick little change there. No time at all. Another advantage of the oils. Yeah, you can glaze that and such too. That would work too in acrylics, but this is just it's blending itself, which is just so nifty. Now let's I'm gonna drop a few of these lighter metal colors in here. And like I said, I was all set to hurriedly go, oh my gosh, I gotta blend these, gotta blend these, gotta blend these. No, don't have to blend them right now, that's for sure. And take some of that away and just a few little touches and completely transforms what that does. So here are these gauntlets. I definitely needed some more lights up here. But when we get to that glazing, like I said, in the next episode, as we work our way through this one, or through this first initial stage here, the goal is to set up all of those real fine, the highlights that happen, the detail in the eyes or whatever, the final sparkly things that we do in the golds, say. We're setting that all up now just as we would if it were acrylics. So I'm just going to set that in there, and then we're just going to blend it out here. Just so much fun. Now let's maybe do a similar thing here with some of our skin tone. Where are we at? Now, I'm not using any kind of a finer brush just yet. Obviously, all we're trying to do is figure out, okay, how light do we want something like these cheekbones to be? So then I can just go in there again and do more of my blending and such. But as you do this, always have to keep in mind that with each and every brush stroke, you pick up more of what's already sitting there. It's kind of the advantage and disadvantage of blending when it's just this wet. I'm going to get myself a little bit of the white spirits in there and see how that just it covers. When it's not wanting to cover, that's probably because it's just too thin. This look at how thin that is. It's practically almost like a bit of a watercolor, but yet with oils, you see how it covers. Probably another thing you'll have to get used to when you consider this versus, say, how you're used to working with acrylics. Yep, that has to be thinner. And by thinner, I mean not a lot, just a little. I'm gonna spread out some of my lights here. That's really more of a strap rather than a piece of, oh, we'll just say armor. And now let's get ourselves some more lights here. I'm going to get my skin tone back out there again. And pretty much just consider it to be pale flesh, just in oil paint form. And I apologize for the sounds of collisions, but there are essentially two small table LED lights that are maybe 2.5 inches from the miniature and probably about 3/4 of an inch from my hand, sometimes less. Especially when you hear the collision sounds, they're a little bit closer, I would say, to the lights. Now, I am going to just go with a somewhat smaller brush. There's some little things I've got to work in here. And this is also thinner. There we go. Get rid of some of that, see if I can't. Now the eyes, I'm going to have to turn on my light. So when it comes to doing more of the finished stuff on the face and all that, I will have to turn my light on. It's just kind of the physics and practicality of things here. Gone with more of a pinkish color for that lower lip that's going to catch the light. Going to try and work in again more of my pink color in the cheeks where that would naturally be. We've got it lightened up. Here, let's get a little more, something that's not the gold color. And now we'll go back to our light over here. Now, if I was, again, in an ideal circumstance, I've got dozens of other figures that I'm working on all at the same time as this, so that this can be, I don't want to say set aside for days to dry. Maybe I need to, for whatever reason, it needs to dry before I can get on to the next stage or whatever. But remember, like the dragon that's been sitting over there, and the paint is all this time, it's just kind of settling in. Not drying, but just becoming a little bit more settled. Let's see how much more, look at the difference we get here. And just like with everything else, we take some of that paint away, and then we can blend. Do the same thing down here, and just so much easier to get at some of those really fun colors. Here we're just going right in with that bright green. All the nifty colors we have that are happening on this big old axe head here, without really having to try very hard. Let's get the other side here. And we're going to lighten this up. See that's scumbling that I can use, but it only goes so far because it's starting to pick up the darker colors that are there. Back to our Payne's gray over here. And how's a little bit dark up there. Gonna go into some of this green again. Now you can't really see a whole bunch of what's going on with the wrappings there, so we'll keep that pretty minimal. There could most likely be some things that just will be impractical to actually show, because you just won't be able to see what's happening. And so that's going to have to be it for this segment right here. I'll do just one more quick one here as we get a little bit more on some of the lights and some darks. Let's get some more stuff out on the palette here, and we'll be right back. So we're back, and we're going to do some more working back and forth. Dark to light, light to dark. We're going to take some of this Payne's gray. We're going to sharpen up some edges here. And give you a little bit of a precursor to some of the glazing. Now, look at this. It's really, I mean, it is as liquid as any glaze would be with acrylics, but look at that. You see how I just touch it there and let it flow? That's the capillary action. We're going to do that on this side. We just let it, we touch it and let it flow by itself. Now, if it's not liquid enough, it just won't do that. So if it's not flowing like that, doing that, it means you just need some more of your white spirits in there. But if you brush it, instead of just touching it in there, well, I think you can figure out what's going to happen. You're just going to make an unholy mess because you got wet oil paint there. But to be able to continue with what I'm doing, I just have to do a couple of glazes in places here, or, well, pin line washes. And it doesn't all have to be just that one color. Heck, it doesn't even have to be a darker glaze. So I'm going to get that even more thinned down. So I just let that get to be a little bit more magenta, and look at this. It's just right over the top of that. It gives it a little bit of a shift, but remember, it has to be liquid. Let's say I don't like what I did right there. No big deal. All I do is just fade it. That's all it takes. And like I said, it's the oils have to be allowed sometimes to just do their own thing. You can't manipulate them in the same way as the acrylics. I mean, if you could, well, what point would there be in using the oils anyways? See, that's a very subtle thing. There was hardly any paint on there at all. But it will settle down into those crevices, even here on this chain. So think of this as just a little bit of a preview of what's going to happen, especially early on in our next episode. But I wanted to emphasize just how different the glazing will work here. So I'm just going to maybe focus in on this area especially. Heck, I could even use a smaller brush. I have done that too. But here we're going to get even more of the... See how that just flowed like that? That's how I knew I finally have the correct amount of white spirits in there, because it just flowed. If it's not flowing by itself, and you need to make it a little bit thinner. There's going to be a bit more of that. But the interesting thing is, you think, my gosh, that's not going to cover it all. But the thinner oils, it's again, it's different than your acrylics. When you really water down acrylics and thin those down, it barely covers it all. But oils, remember, thick over thin, thin over thick. There's a reason why it's going to actually cover. That's just the nature of oils. You may find that maybe just the oils aren't for you. They're just too different. Maybe just let yourself get a little more experience, say, with things like the acrylics or whatever, and maybe find things that are oils that are a little easier for you to find success. So maybe not a lot of the non-metallic metal, or maybe stay away from, say, object source lighting. Just maybe keep it a little bit simpler for your first try with oils. Maybe a simpler figure, something with a lot of open spaces. Something with a cape. Generally, that's your ideal thing, especially to start off with large open surfaces like capes. This maybe is not going to be the most ideal thing for you to do your first oil painting thing. But see how I just... That is actually almost darn near water right there, but it's still covered. It still actually did its job. And look at this. I think a big old, what looks like a blob of water there. And keep in mind, since this is not water, you're not going to get the watermarks. I suppose yet another sort of advantage, I guess you could think of, with the oils. Now, the other thing is I've kind of wondered if doing this also promotes drying time in the paint, or quicker drying in the paint. And the existing layers, look at that. Just see, I just tap it there. Again, I need a little more. I want just right into the white spirits there, and look at that. All of a sudden, we have some dark. Now, there I probably want to use a finer brush. As I do that there, I'm thinking, yeah, I got to go back and find a finer brush for that. Let's see there. Look at that. I can put that down there. And then we're just going to scumble that right into the rest of the blade. Let's get some lighter. Got a few sections of these blades that I need to make lighter here. So yeah, sometimes you can, I don't know, sabotage yourself, set yourself up for something unfortunate by just not picking the right figure, especially when it's something that's that new for you. I certainly need to get some nice light tones right here on the edge of this. I'm going to call it a glaive. And who knows, maybe this is, no, we'll do I think we'll do the sword. We'll give that the super duper blood treatment there. I'm just gonna find myself a few more. Now I'm looking at, oh, okay, so let's just do this maybe. Here, I'm gonna look at what I've got in the reference photo there. What do I see? I see lights there. I see a light over here. Just pull that right down. And then I'm going to go with a bit of a... Let's see, some darker tones right there. We'll just switch this around. We had it lighter, we're going to go darker. But also maybe something like that green in places. That's the, I think, another thing you can really do with the oils, and that is make those little... We do them with the acrylics all the time, make those little changes. Why shouldn't we be able to do those then with the oils? And we've talked about thin over thick and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you get so thin, then you have to go back the other way around. You have to go back to working thicker. I'm just consulting the image again. So in between sessions, I'll look at that. Maybe you might even see a different reference picture up there, maybe. I don't know. Let's see what we're going to do over here too. And you know how much I love having purples in my non-metallic metals, so let's start to introduce some of that now. I think we could use, we could use some right in there. Just one little quick shot of extra flavor there. You'd just be amazed at what that does. And like I said, people don't really even recognize that it's there in the first place. I'm going to try and find myself a few lighter highlights too on... Oh, they're metal, all right. At first, I thought maybe these were dragon scales sort of stuck on here, but no, they're just... Seems like it is metal, sort of made to be in the shape of dragon scales. Let's go find ourselves a few lighter tones on the shoulder here. There's an awful lot of metal edges that we're going to have to do this to. I think you can see what I was just doing there. What do we got? Ah, we got this over here. Just to lighten up that top section. Let's do some more. So you can see how that, it just all of a sudden, things start to happen. Edges start to really take on, well, an edge-like appearance. Who would have thought of that? See, there you just, look at that. A couple little touches now. And all of a sudden, things get that little extra sharpness there. Some crispness. Set this over on its side like that. I'm going to try and hit this right on that side. Yeah, let's say we wanted to make those rusty. Well, remember what I did with the Payne's Gray and some of the fur, doing that little bit of a wash thing. Well, you can do that quite easily. Just make a wash of, well, rust, because hey, I think you saw the color that said rust, and or you can just use sienna. The burnt sienna. Sorry, not raw sienna. I think raw sienna would be something more if you're looking for, say, brass, because it's going to just be more along the lines of a green or greenish color. So you can see it doesn't, and I want to keep some of that reddishness in there, whether it's reflected light or whether it's maybe a little bit of rustiness or so. Who knows? And we'll go a little bit more, so a few lighter things on the golds here. So, and you can see the difference here. Now those glazes have actually settled down a little bit. Again, not like they're dry, but they've just sort of settled down. And believe it or not, if you've got enough of that white spirits in there, those things will start to dry pretty darn fast. Like I said, I don't know 100% for sure that it actually almost acts like a drying element to it. Oh yeah, and I know I'm pretty sure I say this in every oil painting episode. Whenever you do, please don't try to use a hair dryer. just let the thing dry. Because if you use a hair dryer, the oil is going to be removed too fast, and it'll just crack. I mean, if you want crackle paint appearance, well, then you'll get that. You won't really get dry oils. You'll just get a crackle paint. Something tells me probably not the most desired result. I don't think you want crackle paint oils. So yeah, there's plenty. Now we're definitely getting a lot of the rosiness into some of the skin tones there. Now, if this, let's say you want to do this as some kind of super detailed project, whatever, it's for a contest or whatever. Well, then maybe you let the oils dry, and you go. I don't want to say start up again with the oil, but you don't necessarily have to be wet blending everything. It's not necessarily with the oils, because that's, again, part of the amazing thing with them. Now that darker glazing, wow, look what that just allows me to do here now with some of these new applications of lighter colors. I'll probably be doing some glazes in here too in the next episode. Remember, I didn't want to do all of the glazing right now. I just wanted to give you a bit of a preview of what's to come. And we'll definitely be working with some finer brushes. We got all kinds of details that we want to do on this, right? And then to finish it off in that final segment of the last episode, I'll have to glue it on, and I'll see what I can do camera-wise to get more of that on screen for you. Again, going a little bit lighter, but also it's got to be thinned down in order to do that. I think we're starting to, you can see the areas are starting to get that separation now. But think of how complex and massive this thing is. Think of all of the different, we got some greens on that side, purples over here on this side. So we're getting that color variety that we want. I might even go with a little more of my sort of phthalo green in here, maybe a bit of a reflected light there. See if I can't find a few more of those in here. And it's not going to register as green. That's the wondrous part of it. That has nothing to do with oils. That's just sort of that physics of color there. Look at that. Because we know it's going to be standing on the ground, onto the actual dragon's head and such things. Looking to find some little bit of a dark contrast over here in some of these guys. And I'm gonna maybe try to find a bit of reflected light here, because it's all just kind of dark down here. Don't even know if you can see that. I guess it's probably tough for you to see. I think you saw a bit of it. go touch lighter with that. Now, yeah, see, there's... Now, of course, it's the palette, and it's absorbent for a reason. But there's some colors on there that I don't want to say they're dry, but they are not quite so liquid as they were not that long ago. That is neat. I mean, it's not a surprise. It's just kind of fun to see some of the, I guess, the chemistry at work, maybe. Now, I'm going to try and get, a little panel into here. Not everything has to be yellowy, because if you just make it all different shadings of yellow, it's not going to look gold. It's pretty much just going to resemble the Imperial Fist. It's just going to be yellow whatever. It's not going to look like any kind of metal gold armor. It's just going to look like some kind of yellow something. Just going to get an edge right here. Pardon me while I hold my breath a bit. Slow down the heartbeat. There. I'm going to get some light on the underside here now. Let's see, we got purples in there, go all kinds of fun, different things happening all at once. Once again with our essentially maiden flesh there. Let's see if I can't, on the upper reaches of the cheekbones here, and then on the forehead, not so much where the hair is. I'm thinking that needs to almost be sort of in shadow. Now, as far as the eyes go, I will try to do those where you can see that happen. I make no guarantees. I just may not be able to get the brush quite where I want it. But still, for the impossibility of reach, if that was acrylic stuff, I would have had a heck of a time trying to do any sort of blending there. Once again, we have this thinned down considerably. We'll go back into some parts of the chest here, lower torso, arm. Gonna have to figure out what I want to do with that. That's probably, just for the heck of it, we're gonna take our umber here and we'll see if we can't do a quickie little glaze out of that, because we did the glaze with the Payne's Gray. Again, I put some of it there. I'm just gonna grab some of the white spirits here. And we just let it do its thing. We just touch it there. And sometimes you have to thin the stuff down so much it's kind of, you lose track of, am I glazing right now, or what am I doing right now? But this is a little bit of part glazing, part blending. I'm gonna see if I cannot get a little more of my reflected light. And see how it's green. just to, and we got that red right there. We got, again, a little green over here too. I'm going to try and remember those chain of highlights that we talk about sometimes. We're going to see if we can't find some of those right in here. I will go into some more, make that thinner. What have we here? So yeah, you got lots of spiky bits and chains, things going on over here. And I'm going to, let's get some of our lighter skin tone over here. Almost doing a little bit of a stippling technique right there. So that's some of our, again, another part of our panels in the gold armor, but won't worry about that too much right now. So as I'll just end this up with a couple of other little quick glazes here while I'm thinking about them. So that is what we'll begin the next episode with, is just lots of little glazes in places, and not just like glazes in places. Not just Payne's gray like this, but see how that just spread out right there? I just basically touched it there. But we'll do even some things with purple in the glaze. We'll maybe do some rust type things as well. So we'll get it started with the glazing, because remember we got to do that also on our dragon's head and base and that stuff. But I will wish you a thank you for all of your support. It is appreciated, because, well, things like this, I had to have to buy these things, and these aren't the cheapest figures in the world for purchase. So any support that you guys offer via Patreon, that's appreciated. Now, it also does help, believe it or not, if you just throw a like on these, and even if you had a question or something like that, you can ask it right there in the comments on the YouTube channel if you want. That's okay. And, well, I also do those live sessions there. I would like to do live sessions for the Patreon page, but it's just, there is no way to do those where all of the people maybe that would, say, pledge at that level would be able to participate. And it's hard enough for me just to schedule things where it's just me. And then all of a sudden when you have to add in many other people from, lots of different time zones, that's not super easy. But hopefully this makes the oils just seem a little bit more possible. I mean, you can't get much more complicated than that. Look at all this stuff sticking off of her. This could have conceivably drove me nuts, actually, if I was doing this in acrylics. So that's why, as soon as I saw this, I said, yeah, this is going to be done in oils. So hopefully you are looking forward to episode 2 here of painting Black Sun. And look at this quick little, sorry, can't resist, gotta keep doing it. Now thanks again everybody. Let me bring Mr. Dragonhead over here. I'll catch you on the next episode.